Who in their right minds would want to pay $1,700 for a display that's only 27 inches, 60 Hz refresh rate, and only one input? It took me about $4,000 to come back to the studio display and to eat my own words, but hear me out. It all started with the M1 iMac, or actually the iMac Pro, which came before the M series of processors. The iMac Pro was probably my favorite all-in-one computer of all time. That 27-inch display 5K Retina was stunning, and everything about that machine was almost perfect. When Apple switched to M series of processors, they released the iMac in a 24-inch version, so I went ahead and bought that. It was a fantastic all-in-one computer, but slightly smaller than what I was used to. Now, since I had already bought it, I stuck with it for almost a year, and it was super speedy. I had bought the 16 gigs 512 gig storage version, which served me beautifully from a performance perspective. But the fact that it was slightly smaller kept me thinking about moving to something larger. Apple doesn't offer anything larger from a desktop perspective, so I waited until the Mac Mini M2 Pro was released, and that was my next purchase. With that, I thought it was the perfect opportunity to increase my screen size, and that's where this journey began. I started out with the Samsung Odyssey G8 32-inch 4K monitor with 240 Hz refresh rate. I thought that would be the perfect monitor for my setup, and it's a great monitor, but no match for the 5K display on the iMac Pro or even the 24-inch iMac. Let me explain to you why. First, the color calibration or color reproduction wasn't as good as the iMac screens. Second, there were no speakers built in on it, so I had to buy an additional pair of speakers for it. Fine, not that big of a deal. Third, it didn't have a webcam built in either, so that was an additional step. Now, adding all of these also meant increasing the cable clutter. With the iMac, there was just one cable going to the power. Now I had that one cable from the Mac Mini going to the power, but in addition to that, I had the power cable of the monitor also going in there. I also had the HDMI cable going from the M2 Mac Mini to the monitor. Then there were speakers which had a separate power connection as well as 3.5mm connection to my Mac Mini, and then a speaker wire between the two speakers. On top of that, you also had the webcam through a USB cable going back into the Mac Mini. Regardless, to say there was tons of cable clutter, I managed to sort most of that out. However, the fact that the colors on display weren't the greatest kept me thinking for something better. So my next purchase was the 42-inch LG OLED TV. Yes, that's right, a TV, not a monitor. Now, it handled two things here. First, the colors, and secondly, the built-in speakers, so that helped me get rid of the speakers. That TV cost me roughly $800 or about 3,000 dirhams, so that was the second major purchase. After setting that up, the colors were incredible. I don't think I've seen colors on any Apple display that pop as well as the ones on the OLED TV. 120 Hz refresh rate was also butter smooth. Everything flowed so beautifully on there. The speakers were okay, not the greatest, but hey, livable. They were fine. But the biggest issue with that was the clarity in text. Even though this was a 4K monitor and I was scaling the display at a full 4K of it, the text wasn't sharp enough. It was fuzzy, and oftentimes looking at it at a long period of time would give me a small headache, so that didn't really go down that well. So I went for the biggest, baddest monitor that I could buy, and that was the Samsung G8 Neo, which was a 57-inch display that was two 4K displays put together. It was so freaking big that I didn't have any space left on my desk after using that for a while. And it also came with its own set of issues, namely the speakers need to be connected, but I didn't have any space anymore. The webcam needed to be connected, and that was an issue as well. Colors were fine, resolution was great, the size was massive, but the text clarity was the one thing that just kept coming back to me from the iMac days. The Samsung Neo G8 monitor, the cost of it was over $2,000. So if you're keeping tab, $2,000 for the Neo G8, and then you had the LG OLED, which was $1,000, and then another $1,000 for the initial Samsung. That's $4,000 that I had spent on monitors, and I still wasn't satisfied. Now, just to comfort myself on spending $2,000 on this massive monitor, I thought that I'll bring out my old iMac 24-inch display, and the fact that I've got a 57-inch ultra-wide screen with 120 Hz would be more than enough to justify that. But after spending 1 week with the iMac, I realized that the clarity of text was more important than the larger screen or the 120 Hz refresh rate. And that brings us back to the Apple Studio display. It is larger, 27 inches, which is the same size as the iMac Pro that I originally had, and it has the same 5K resolution of my 5-year-old iMac Pro, but that screen is completely worth purely because of how clear the text is. The bonus? The speakers sound phenomenal as well, so I don't need external speakers. It's got a webcam, which isn't honestly the greatest, but I don't need to worry about it. It's the person who's sitting on the other side of the call that sees me in that. And to balance that, I've got my Sony SLR that's hooked up to the Mac in case I want to record anything for streaming or for videos. So that was my journey coming back to the Studio display after going through all of these monitors. I don't know what you value more, but for me, text clarity is something that I realized I value the most. Let me know what your preferences are, and if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, please.